Howdy, friends, and welcome to The Story Field. This is a podcast where we talk about business, faith, and life in general.
Okay, so here's the deal. We want you to be encouraged. We want you living in hope. This life we live is complex. It's hard at times. At The Story Field, you will find great stories of normal people just like us who will inspire you. Our goal is that you leave encouraged, inspired, and excited to move forward in life. But before we get started, one thing though, if you're listening and you find yourself really hopeless right now, send us an email at hope@thestoryfield.com so we can pray for you. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get started.
Hey, Storyfield, it's Micah. We're back with another amazing episodes. And of course, Josh isn't here because he likes to get lost in the woods in the summer, do some fly fishing, get closer to nature, and then I don't know what else he does because I never get invited. So I am here. I am stoked because this is something that sometimes doesn't get talked to as much as it should, and I have experience with it. And our new friend is going to tell us all about it. His name is Jay Lowder. Welcome, Jay.
Hey, man, good to be with you today.
Man, you have done so much stuff on this particular topic, which we'll get into later. But, I mean, you've written books. You've produced TV shows. Man, you've been on TV yourself being interviewed. But as we always do, let's start off so people can kind of get to know who you are. Tell us a little about where you grew up. You got siblings, all those kind of cool details so they can get a little hang of who Jay is.
Yeah, I grew up, I live in Texas, and I grew up in North Texas, the border of Oklahoma, not in Oklahoma, and let me make sure I quantify that. Grew up in a traditional Southern home, went to church on Sundays. My dad was an entrepreneur, owned 54 convenience stores in North Texas, Southern Oklahoma. Middle child, got an older sister, got a younger sister. Honestly, just really a pretty typical Southern family, came from good stock. Mom and dad, my father passed a couple of months ago. My parents, my gosh, oh heck, I don't know. They were married 50 years. Just great folks, love the Lord, hardworking people, salt of the earth. And, like I say, just a pretty traditional Southern family, really.
So I noticed that you had to specify that Oklahoma. Do you get that a lot? Because I live in Austin and grew up in Houston, I say the same exact thing. Like, I got family that's from Oklahoma, and I'm like, man, they're from Oklahoma. It's kind of crazy about this.
Yeah, man, we're literally like 9 miles from the border. So,
oh my gosh,
we're right there. I mean, a hop, skip, and a jump. So obviously, it's an ongoing deal between Texas and Oklahoma folks. But yeah, Texas, man, not Oklahoma for sure.
Yes, sir. And what did you like? Were you in a small town, I'm assuming? And did you play sports? Did you do the hunting, fishing thing?
Yeah, I live in Wichita Falls, city of about 100,000. Hunting and fishing, it has always been a big part of my life. It still is. Matter of fact, right down the hallway, I wish you could see it, but of course, I'm on my desktop, but I've got a record book, black bear, full body mount. I've got several turkeys mounted in my office and whitetails. So yeah, I grew up hunting and fishing, still a big part of my life. When I'm not on the road and I'm not in front of people, that's kind of my escape. So yeah, I'm 6'6". You probably can't tell that me sitting down, but played basketball. So basketball and hunting and fishing. Even now, big things in my life.
And where is your favorite? What would you say is like your favorite place to hunt?
Oh gosh, man, I've been on 3 elk hunts in the last 5 years, but I'm strictly fair chase, so I don't do anything high fence. I'm not criticizing people that do. It's just not my thing. Man, oh gosh, I've been on so many hunts. I guess if I had to narrow it down to my favorite hunt of all time, it would be black bear hunting in Canada.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, man, there's nothing like it. I could black bear hunt in Canada and not kill anything and just watch bears all day long and be completely fulfilled.
Well, I did a creative missions, which is a group of ministry folks that are in the creative realm, worship or art or any of those kinds of things. And we did a trip to Alaska, and while we were there, we were in this little small village north of Anchorage, and all of a sudden, some people were like freaking out, and it's because like a black bear had just decided to like show up and just hang out with us. Like, wasn't aggressive, wasn't anything, but for us being in, for some of us
Yeah.
being in Texas and some of them being in Florida and all this other stuff, they were like, "That's the most gigantic thing I've ever seen."
Yeah, man, I've got a monster down the hallway, 20 and 5/16 spring hunt out of Alberta, right out of the den, over 400 pounds. I'm a bow hunter at that, so I got rid of all my rifles years ago. We talked earlier before we actually got online, and I love to bass fish. I'm also a big trout fisherman. I love to fish San Juan River. So yeah, man, hunting and fishing's right up, right up. Matter of fact, not only that, but I do a lot of speaking. It's been ironic how I would have never dreamed that God could use my passion for hunting and fishing as a catalyst, as really a trampoline for me to speak into other people's lives, because we do these men's events all over the country. And matter of fact, I'm doing one in November, one of the biggest in the country. There'll be 5,000 men there. But I've noticed that some men that would never go to a traditional church setting, they will come to the sportsman's events that we do, because I mean, I do a talk, the 5 life lessons I've learned hunting and fishing, and we give away elk hunting trips and whitetail trips and fly fishing trips and bass fishing trips and four-wheelers. And we do this all over the country. And it's been kind of cool to see men that, again, might not normally go to church, but are in the hunting and fishing community, and they will come to an event like that and get exposed to the gospel. So it's been cool how God's used that.
That's what we, as a ex church planter, I remember that was some of the stuff that we always talked about, was like, how do we get men's engagement? Because I mean, the old saying was that if the wife can get the husband to go, that he'll go occasionally.
Yeah.
But we needed to switch it to where the husband would go all the time and then bring the whole family. Like, what are those things that you could do? And that sounds like a perfect example of like maybe guys that have never even thought about the gospel or heard Jesus, or not even if you're not, I don't want to say like your guerrilla tactics about it, but even if you're not like super open that you're talking religious stuff, the principles you're bringing up can eventually, may hit that little trigger, and then they'll start asking more questions and all that other stuff. So I mean, that's pretty awesome. That um, it's just another example of one of those things that happens when you're trying to do things for the Lord, and then He'll open up those doors, right?
Yeah, it came about. A friend of mine, he travels around the country with a Labrador Retriever. It takes his lab in churches. And same thing, people will go hear him that normally might not go to church. His dogs are absolutely phenomenal. His dogs obey better than most people's kids do. And kind of the same thing. One day he was talking to his wife, and she said, "Why don't you let God use your passion for Labrador Retrievers?" And he's like, "How is God going to use Labrador Retrievers? Give me a break." And anyway, he was talking to a friend of his. He goes to a mega church in Houston, and he said, "Hey, man, that's a cool idea. Why don't you come speak to the youth group?" And so he brought his lab, and his lab was doing some stuff, and the teenagers loved it. And then one of the people, one of the teachers that was there, had a friend that pastored a church. Anyway, long story short, through that, he travels all over the nation and brings his dog in. And I mean, we use him in some of our events. Excuse me, and he's absolutely phenomenal. And I got to wondering, I mean, this hobby of mine to hunt and fish that I've always had a passion for, I mean, is it possible God could use that? And one of my favorite stories is in the Metroplex. When we first got started, somebody brought us in, and the pastor was telling me about this guy that lived in his neighborhood, real wealthy guy. And he'd been inviting him to church for 6 years. I mean, invited him for Christmas, invited him for Easter, and the guy would never come. And they put on this sportsman's event, and it's not like I'm talking about stuff that I don't know. I mean, I'm a legitimate sportsman. I've been featured in ESPN Outdoors. I've been on several major networks. So it's not like I'm pretending to be something I'm not. But anyway, they build it as not come here a preacher. They build it as it's faith-based, but come here a guy that is a legitimate, big game hunter. And anyway, this guy who he had invited for years that would never even think about coming to church came to church, gave his life to Christ. He's now actually the leader of the deacons in the church. So it's just kind of one example of how God can use anybody, anything, when you're willing to surrender it to him.
Right. Man, that's just it's so awesome. Story after story of just kind of like random encounters and stuff like that that God puts in front of you, and you're able to kind of take advantage of it, whether it's sports or outdoors or whatever it is. Now,
Absolutely.
let's go back to kind of the reason why uh, we wanted people to hear your story. So take us back to your younger days and sort of what you're real passionate about. Like the reason why you're passionate about what you are. And I'm not going to tell anybody. I just want them to hear your story, and then we'll get into the after effects.
Well, like most students, and I'm privileged to get to speak to a lot of college students and high school students. Uh, in high school, I did what a lot of students do and gave in to peer pressure and started getting involved in the wrong things. And part of that stemmed from the fact of I had a pseudo Christianity. Again, grew up in church. We went every Sunday. In the South, that's what you do. Doesn't mean you're a believer. It doesn't mean you have a relationship. It's more of a place that you just go. But I thought, well, since we went to church and since my mom taught Sunday school, I mean, yeah, I'm good to go. But there was no real relationship. So I was going through the motions. I went to church because my parents made me go to church. But again, in my high school years, I started giving into peer pressure and started getting involved in different things. Long story short, I end up going off to college and make it one semester and drop out because now that I don't have my parents over my shoulder, the habits that I got involved in high school have now went off the rails. And so anyway, I moved back home where to Wichita Falls. I was going to college in Abilene, came back to Wichita Falls, moved in with an old high school buddy of mine. And man, my life just spiraled out of control. By the time I hit 21, I'm living on government unemployment. I'm forging government documents in order to have income, not because I couldn't work. I mean, I say that I guess I could. Physically, I could have worked. I was
Right.
an alcoholic, but I mean, I guess I could have worked. But I'm 21 years of age. I'm living in an $80 a month rent house. I'm an alcoholic. I've lost everything. I lost my car. Again, what few jobs I'd had, I couldn't keep. I forging government documents, and in that same time, lost the girl that I was dating. And of course, if you put yourself in the perspective of a 21-year-old guy,
Right.
loss of your dignity, your car, your girlfriend, and I'd struggled with suicidal thoughts for quite some time. And anyway, finally one day, I just decided to end my life. It just seemed as though there was really no hope for the future. I didn't like who I was. I didn't like who I pretended to be. And it just seemed like the only escape. The best way I can explain it, and I've used this analogy before because it makes sense, but for those folks that have seen the footage of 9/11, they saw the horrific details of people who were multiple stories up in the Twin Towers, and the smoke was billowing behind them. And eventually the heat got so hot, we tragically saw people jump to their death. The truth of it is, a lot of those people didn't want to die. But the quicker out for them, rather than burning to death, it seemed more realistic to them to try to escape the immediate pain. And that's the only way I know how to explain it. It's not that I really wanted to die, I just didn't want to live. And since there didn't seem to me to be any way to get out of the ditch that I was stuck in, I decided one day when I woke up about 12 o'clock to end my life. I lived with a roommate, a buddy that I'd known, grew up in California, and he worked for his father. And so he never came home during the day because he had a 30-minute lunch break. And our duplex would have been, oh gosh, 20 minutes. I mean, he could have never made it there and back. And again, I'd been contemplating this for a while. And I took out the pistol I had hidden underneath the sofa, which was my bed, and decided just to end my life. And loaded the gun and cocked back the hammer and raised the gun, put it to my right temple, And I distinctly remember it was like I didn't hear any voices, but it was as though I did, because there was one side saying, one side of my brain telling me, go ahead and do this. This is the only option. And then there was another side telling me that this wasn't the answer. And then there was another side saying, well, when you're in your life, I never really gave any thought to heaven or hell, but I began to question it then. When I
Right.
die, am I going to go to heaven or hell? I wasn't even sure that God was real. I didn't know if God knew my zip code, man, let alone if it
Right.
was real. And so there was one side of me that thought, well, if God's real, I guess I'll go to heaven because, I went to church and I was baptized when I was a kid. And then there was another side of me that thought, man, you're not going to heaven because it doesn't exist. If God were real, you wouldn't be sitting here with a gun to your head. Anyway, just the smorgasbord, the gumbo of different thoughts and the hopelessness and the depression just set in. And I think in some ways it even escalated the desire to want to die.
Maybe. Yeah.
So I put my finger on the trigger and literally was putting pressure on the trigger when I heard somebody pull up on the gravel driveway, which was unheard of because everybody either worked or went to college. My roommate certainly wouldn't be coming home. But it was enough to startle me that when I heard somebody pulling up on the gravel, not knowing who it could possibly be, I got off the sofa and looked out the blinds. And it was my roommate.
Mm.
And so I disengaged the hammer, put it underneath the sofa, turned on the TV, and my roommate opens the door. And I said, man, what are you doing home? And he said, Jay, it's the craziest thing. He said, my dad. My dad's the hardest guy in the world to work for. And my dad went up to me and said, I know I never do this, but today I am. I want you to take the rest of the day off, but I'm going to pay you for a full day. And man, when he said that, I thought either
Wow.
this is the biggest coincidence of my life, or maybe God's real and he's trying to keep me from ending my life. I didn't know what it was.
Right.
My roommate later told me, because obviously he didn't know, but he came and heard me speaking where you live in Austin, Texas. And I was speaking at a mega church there. He came to hear me and he said, Jay, that day when I walked in, he said, I didn't say anything. And he said, I've never felt the presence of evil in my life but once. And he said, it was the day I walked in our duplex, the day that you were going to end your life.
Mm.
So, man, through a providential set of circumstances, again, I didn't know if it was providential at the time, if it was luck or what, my life was spared.
Well, I don't think it was luck. It's the it's the battle between like good and evil that you just like were witness to both sides, and then there's the, like you said, the jambalaya in the middle, kind of like and then uh God made something happen. I mean, if you don't believe in God, of course you're going to think it's a coincidence and all that other stuff, but there's real no reason for someone to get a day off and just randomly show up right when you're going to do that. I mean, the coincidences are too much, man. That's just, and so I want, just real quick, I want to go back. Was it just the alcohol and everything else, or was there drugs, or was there just partying to kind of
All
get
of it.
you to this point?
Yeah, it was all of it. Part of it was I grew up in a home. My dad was very successful. And I mean, unlike a lot of people, I had a good network. I mean, my mom and dad are great people. I never saw my parents go through a divorce. I never saw my parents didn't even drink alcohol, man. So, I mean, I had a great example. And so I always thought I would be a successful guy. I was going to follow in my father's footsteps. I was going to be an entrepreneur. And here I am, a college dropout, forging government documents, uh, lost literally everything. I'm living in an absolute hellhole. Um, I mean, for a guy 21 years of age that grew up the way that I grew up, I just hated who I had become. I was embarrassed of who I had become. I was a
Right.
complete and utter failure. Now, there were mental health issues, there was depression, there was addiction, there was a loss of a relationship that at the time meant the world to me that I
Yeah.
thought was healthy that wasn't. So, I mean, yes, there was part of it that was certainly situational, but there were a lot of factors that went into it. I mean, I found in my years of doing what I do that there are multitudes of people that, I mean, there's a myriad of reasons. Some people have suicidal tendencies because of strictly mental health issues. Some people have suicidal tendencies because of situational things. It could be a tragedy. It could be a divorce. Sometimes it's cumulative. It's just a lot of things together.
Do you think
And
there was pressure on yourself that you had these aspirations to be as successful as your pops did, and then that mounted to it? I mean, I'm just trying to give people a full picture who may be somewhat going through the same thing, because I felt pressure. Um, I lived with my grandparents for the most part, and my grandpa was that guy. I mean, he had his scotch every night and whatever, but he was very successful. I kind of emulated him to some extent, and then when you fail, um, it adds that extra amount. And so not only of all those other things, the part with your pops, um, it's just people go through hard times with their families and their work and all that other stuff. I'm just trying to point out that um, at some point we got to relieve ourselves of the pressure of trying to maybe impress our parents.
yeah, I think that was a part of it. But again, I have to say it was cumulative. I mean, the proverbial, there was many straws that broke the camel's back. It was a failure after a failure after a failure. Matter of fact, the day that I put a gun to my head, I woke up with a hangover. I walked into the bathroom. A common thing is I would go in the bathroom, put cold water on my face to just kind of try to sober up. And for some reason, I don't know why, I did this every day. But when I walked in the bathroom and I'd splash water on my face, I looked in the mirror and I remember looking at my reflection and going, what a loser.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a college dropout. You let everybody down. You've lost everything. You are a maniac with depression and addiction issues. My roommate a few weeks before that had come home and said, Jay, you need to go to AA. And I'm like, man, AA's for alcoholics. Are you crazy? And he said, Jay, you're an alcoholic. I'm like, I couldn't even. I said, what are you talking about, an alcoholic?
Yeah.
And he said, well, man, what do you call a guy? So when I leave for work, sometimes in the morning, you're drinking. When I come home at night from my girlfriend's house, you're drinking. When I'm on the weekends, when I'm not at working, you're drinking. What do you call a guy that drinks all day? But I couldn't see it. But you put all those factors together, and plus I was very isolated at the time. And oftentimes that's a strategic point of the enemy. I mean, again, I wasn't associated with my family. My roommate worked all day, then he went to his girlfriend's house. All my friends were doing life, college,
Right.
etc. And I'm sitting all day in an $80 a month rent house that doesn't have an air conditioner. I mean, it's just a desperate, hopeless situation, or it seemed to me to be that at the time. So I couldn't pinpoint it on one specific thing. It was just a network of problems.
Well, that's pretty awesome that you had a roommate that was so. I mean, I've had roommates, and some of them would have been like, "Meh, he is who he is." But I mean, everybody should have those people in their lives that gets in their face and tells them like, "What's up?" I
Well,
mean,
I
that's
don't
what.
think he was telling me because he was trying to help me. He was sick of dealing with me. At the time I didn't have money to pay my part of the rent.
Yeah.
He was sick of coming home and seeing somebody passed out, wasted. Um, I think he was tired of me. But after I made this suicide attempt, now my roommate grew up in California. He didn't grow up like I did. He came from a broken family. His mother committed suicide in front of him when he was 8 years of age. So his background compared to mine was completely different. One night he comes home and he walked in the door, and obviously we always had plenty of alcohol, and so I always wanted him to drink when he got home or get high or something. And he came home one night, and I threw him a beer, and he said, I'm done. So what do you mean? He said, man, I'm no longer drinking. I'm like, come on, man, what are you talking about?
Right.
And plus, he would go to the bars with me. You know, it's not like he was. I mean, he was no choir boy. And he said, I said, "What do you mean you're not drinking? You're not getting high anymore?" I said, "No, man, I'm done." And he said, "I gave my life to Christ." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, man, get serious." What do you mean? He said, "Yeah, man, I went to this church event and I got saved." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, man." I said, "Yeah, uh-huh. I grew up in church, been there, done that. I walked
Yeah.
out." I said, my exact words were to him were, "You won't make it 2 weeks." I mean, it was a joke to me, you know.
Right.
And anyway, every night when he came home, whether it was from work, really from his girlfriend's house, he'd come in. And so when I'd hear him pull up on the gravel driveway, I slept on the sofa, so he had to walk right past me. And so I would pretend I was asleep because I wanted to see, because he started coming home reading the Bible. This guy never owned a Bible. Nobody in his family ever owned a Bible. And so he would come in, and again, you have to understand, we're living in a duplex. So I sleep on a sofa in this little bitty den, and then there's this little bitty kitchen. And so he was going into the kitchen, and he would sit there and read his Bible. And he had this little booklet. It was called Survival Kit for New Christians. And so when he'd come in, I'd hear him pull up on the gravel driveway. I'd pretend I was asleep just to see if he was going to continue to go in the kitchen and read his Bible. And man, he was doing this night after night after night. And so one night I got the idea, excuse me, I had a flashlight because we didn't have any lamps, man. And I had a flashlight that I kept under the sofa. And so one night I slipped into the kitchen and I got his survival kit
Right.
and I took it to the sofa and I pulled the covers over my head and I was sitting there reading what this guy was writing. And I mean, I thought the guy'd lost his mind. I mean, he was
Right.
answering these questions and, you know, it had like, what are you praying for? And how do you feel about just different things? And I mean, it was like a love letter. And I thought this guy, he's smoking something good. I mean, something's off,
Right.
but he kept doing it. And then the weird thing is I started seeing, I mean, I went to church my whole life. I never saw anybody that really lived for God. They were just like I was. They partied on Saturday night, went to church on Sunday and laughed about it. But man, I saw a change in his life. I mean, he was a different guy. And so that was having an impact on me because I was still thinking about ending my life. And then I got to a phase where I thought, you know, I won't shoot myself in the head. I'm going to shoot myself in the leg because I want somebody to know how bad I'm hurting. And then maybe if I pretend that I had this accidental shooting, then somebody will understand how deep my hurt is.
Right.
And then yet I'm seeing this change in my roommate that doesn't make sense. And so now I'm beginning to wonder, I mean, man, it seems like the God I grew up hearing about is not the God he knows because I don't know who he is anymore. So, I mean, man, there was a lot going on at that time in my life that was trying to pull me out of this depression, pull me out of this addiction, pull me out of this downward spiral.
So after the incident, I mean, you're seeing this. I'm assuming this is before the incident. Like you seen his change, or is this after?
It's after.
So after. So did you seeing this real life example of change in front of you? Did that help like push you to like, oh, well, maybe I need his version. I've never seen his version of who this God and this Jesus is. Did that kind of help push you?
Well, again, initially it was skepticism.
Right.
Then when I saw the consistency of it, I thought, well, it's still not going to last, but he's going through a phase. But then as time went on, I mean, just the way he talked, I mean, the curse words were gone, just the thought patterns, the way we lived our life. I mean, it was just so obvious that there was a change. So there was a side of me that I think there was a side that wanted it not to be real. And then there was a side of me that struggled with it's undeniable that it is real. But again, when you're a person with mental health issues and you have suicidal tendencies, there's such an inconsistency in your own life. The sways are so big. The teeter-totter can go back and forth so quickly. And so it's, again, a conglomeration of emotions and doubts and insecurities, but there was a pull. There definitely was a pull. But there was also a side of me that thought, even though it's been consistent, it won't last. And I was
Right.
really kind of waiting for the ship to hit the dock and him to turn out being like everybody else I had ever known was, that it was just a phase that he went through. But it never happened. He just
That was
stayed.
that was your doubting Jay moment.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure.
Unstuck coaches hates it when movement and progress in a person's life or business is stuck or frozen or slowed or just stopped altogether. Well, we have found a solution. Unstuckcoaches.com. They offer a variety of coaching services to get you or your business moving again. Check out unstuckcoaches.com.
Hey, y'all. I just want to make an observation. When I see someone going through a legal situation, it seems like there are way too many unknowns. Well, the Allen firm provides legal guidance so that you can make a great decision, come to a resolution, and be at peace. For more information about the Allen firm, visit allenlawfirm.com. All this is happening and stuff continues, see this change and everything. What was it that made you like that flipped the switch?
Yeah. So we didn't have a washer or dryer. I mean, we're broke as a joke. So somewhere along the line, I had managed to talk my dad into loaning me or co-signing on this old beat up pickup, so I'd have transportation, so I could try to get a job, try to get my life on track. And so I go to my parents' house and wash clothes, and I'm washing clothes, and I hear my mom calling my name. I walked into the den. My mom had previously seen a commercial, and when the commercial came on, my mom called me in the den and she pointed towards the television. And I only caught, I mean, it's probably a 30-second commercial, but I only caught probably 10 seconds of it. But it was this guy that made mention that he had attempted suicide. And then it had a tagline at the end that he was coming to a municipal auditorium, which is a neutral, it's a big facility here in town. They do concerts and whatever. And my mom, obviously, my mom knew my life was a wreck. My mom did not know how close I was to suicide. And my mom knew I had an addiction. But again, my mom had previously seen this commercial and thought, this guy, the guy that was coming is a younger guy, and she thought maybe Jay could relate to him. And so at the end of the commercial, my mom said, you ought to go hear him, which was kind of eerie because I thought, does my mom know about my suicidal tendencies? Or why would she be wanting me to go? But I told my mom, I said, Mom, no way. I'm done with that. You know, church, that's a part of my past. You know, been there, done that. I'm finished with that. But at the same time, there was a real interest. I was like, maybe I could go hear this guy, because suicide wasn't something you talked about. I mean, it wasn't something you told somebody. You didn't tell the network of people you knew, hey, I'm thinking of every day it's a struggle not to blow my brains out. You didn't talk like that. Nobody knew, because again, the enemy had pushed me to this island, and I was embarrassed of my suicidal tendencies, and I was embarrassed of who I was, and so I would never dare tell anybody. But I'm in there washing clothes and thinking, maybe if I go hear this guy, he can give me some tools that can help me escape these thoughts I have. I didn't know if I was going to go or not, but I thought about it. So the event was, I don't know, it's like 4 or 5 weeks later. And when I would see my mom intermittently, she'd say, hey, did you give it any more thought? I'm like, no, Mom. So anyway, I see my mom like 2 days before this guy's coming to town. And he was a cool guy. He was a young guy. I could tell just in the commercial, he wasn't a typical preacher. Was kind of a turnoff to me. You know, some guy with slick back hair, and he just was real, man. And my mom said, "Are you coming?" I'm like, "No." I had plans with a buddy of mine named Keith. We were going out drinking, and so ends up, my buddy no-shows me on the night this event's supposed to start. And I've got nothing to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, you know what? I'm gonna go over to the auditorium, and I know how church works. It's like 20 minutes of music, and then the guy starts talking. So I'm just gonna sit in my pickup, I'll polish off a few beers, kind of get a good buzz going. I'll wait about 20 minutes, and then I'll walk in. I can skip all the songs and all that stuff, and go in and hear this guy. And that's what I did. I drank 3 or 4 beers, and walked in late. I didn't think there'd be that many people. The place is packed. I walk up in the balcony, sitting on the top row, hoping nobody sees me. And this guy gets up, man. And so what I thought it was going to be, him talking about his suicide attempt, he doesn't say a word about it. Nothing, not one single word. This whole talk he gives is, I've heard Jesus died on the cross and rose from the grave, and I'm like, I know that story, but it wasn't like that, man. He told the story. It was like a firsthand account. It was like you were watching the crucifixion.
Man.
He went into the details, about the steel balls and the cat o' nine tails and the pieces of bone digging in God's flesh, and the soldiers spitting in his face, and the spikes through his hands and feet, and the cross being dropped in the hole, and his body shaking and his body quivering and blood running down his eyes, and God turning his back on him, and the sins of the world being laid on him. And Jesus saying to one of the executioners, God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And man, I'm sitting there listening to this, and I'm going, I've never, man, listen, I've heard the gospel. I've never heard anything like this.
Yeah.
And I start seeing myself in the story. And, he's talking about, it wasn't the executioners that killed Christ. It was you. And it was the way you lived your life. But it didn't matter. He went anyway. And when he told God to forgive the Roman soldiers, he was really saying, God, forgive Jay, forgive the people here. I got to thinking, because I hated this, when he talked about the Roman soldier, this master of death, man, I hated this guy.
Right.
I realized I am him. That's me. I spent my whole life beating Christ with a cat of nine tails by the way I lived my life. I've spent my whole life denying him. I spent my whole life questioning him. And then, he talked about the thief on the cross. And this thief on the cross, who originally was cursing Christ, now all of a sudden turns to Jesus because he sees something in him that's so real. And he says, would you just remember my name? And I thought, man, it would be, I don't deserve for God to forgive me. I deserve to go to hell. I know that. But I felt like that dude on the cross, like, if I was even worthy to be remembered,
Yeah.
Man, that would be worth something to me, And so anyway, he gets to the end of it. It's like there's probably 2,500 people there, but it seems like there's me and that guy speaking. I'm oblivious. I walked in wanting nobody to see me or know I was there, and somewhere in the midst of all this, it's like I'm the only person in the auditorium. It's like this guy he's been reading my phone. And he gets to the end and he says, some of you grew up in church. You've been in church your whole life. You walked an aisle. You've been baptized. You've been confirmed. You've been sprinkled, whatever. You know all about Jesus, but you don't know Jesus. And for some of you, you're going to one day die, and you're going to spend eternity separated from God singing Amazing Grace. And dude, when he said that, I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm a phony, man. Yeah, I walked an aisle and all that, but I don't know God. I know about God. I don't know what a relationship with God is. And then he said this. He said, he quoted John 3:36, which says, he that has the Son has life. He who doesn't have the Son doesn't have life. Well, for the average guy, it's like, okay, whatever. But for me, when I hear John 3:36, I'm thinking back to a pistol stuck on my right temple. And when I hear he that has the Son doesn't have life, I understand what that means. It doesn't mean that he's not breathing. It means he doesn't have a reason to exist. And so everything is just like, it's like I'm being pinned to the wall with a spear.
Yeah.
And then the final thing he says, in a minute, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to give their life to Christ. And he says, for some of you, he said, the way it works is God's Spirit, a person doesn't just come to God on their own. A person comes to God when the Holy Spirit draws them. And I didn't understand all the Holy Spirit and all that. But he said, you can only come to God when the Spirit of God draws you. And I didn't really know what draw meant, but I thought it meant what I was feeling, this pull to get right with God, this pull to know him. And he said, it's possible that there may be somebody here tonight that this is the last opportunity they ever have. They'll ever have where God's Spirit tries to bring them to Christ. He's tried before and they said no, and they gave excuses and they rejected Christ. And it's possible that this may be the last opportunity for some people. It wasn't a scare tactic, man. What he said was true. Genesis 6:3, God's Spirit doesn't always strive with man. And I'm telling you, when he said that, and I know that I know unequivocally, undeniably, and there's nobody that could ever convince me different, that was my last opportunity to say yes to Christ. And I knew it. It's now or never. I've had a million opportunities. I've stiff-armed God my whole life. And I don't know what God's Spirit, who he is or really what he does, but I know I feel this pull, and I can only sense that this pull I feel that I've never felt before is God's Spirit trying to bring me to Christ, and it's now or never. And at that moment, so broken over my sin, nobody had to tell me I was a sinner. I didn't want religion. I wanted more than I've ever wanted anything before or since. I didn't want to get clean. I didn't want an experience. I wanted Jesus Christ to be real in my life, whatever that means. If that means I lose everything, if that means I have to go to a foreign land, if that means that I never wake up tomorrow, I don't care. Whatever it means, all I know is I've tried everything else. Nothing else has worked. I want him in my life. Period. And the guy could have said, in order to know Christ, you got to jump off a bridge tonight. I would have done it. And he told people, well, I'm going to give you an opportunity. You can make a public stand for Christ. I'm going to ask you to get out of your seat and be unashamed. You do everything else publicly. I'm going to ask you to be unashamed, to make a public stand for Christ and to give your life to Christ, to make a stand for Jesus. And I'm telling you, I knew that I knew that I knew. I mean, I'm broken. I can't put my life back together. This Jesus that did this for me, that was slaughtered, that was hung between heaven and earth like a scarecrow, that took on, I think about all my sin, man, and the guilt and the shame that it's brought on me, and then think about all that he was carrying in the world. Hey, this is a no-brainer, man. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
I need a new life. And I don't need a change. I need a new life. And so there was a guy, again, I'm 6'6". There was a guy I used to play basketball with. I didn't even know he was there. And he asked people to get up out of their seat and to come forward. And I would have never thought this guy would have attended church in a million years. I mean, this guy, he wasn't worse than I was, but I thought he was worse than I was because I wasn't snorting cocaine and he was.
Yeah.
And so I thought he was worse than me. And he's the very first guy that stood up. The very first guy. I couldn't believe it. But anyway, so I gave my life to Christ. I got on my knees. I don't remember exactly what I said. I just know I said, God, I'm a sinner. I want to be free. It really wasn't what I said. It was the attitude of my heart. It was saying, Jesus, come in my life. I surrender. I got up the white flag. I'm yours. Come in my life. Well, I felt different. I felt peace, and I hadn't felt peace, man. I hadn't felt peace in years. I mean, I remember I used to shave in the bathroom, and I'd see where my tears would make rows down my shaving cream from crying when I looked in the mirror because I had no peace, and I had peace at that moment. And this sounds so corny, I'm reluctant to even tell it because it sounds so stupid, but it was so pivotal to me. When I walked out of the doors of the auditorium, it's the first time in my life I ever noticed the moon. And when I walked out, I mean, everything
Yeah.
looked different. Everything looked different. And then it hit me. Why am I noticing? I've never noticed the moon before. Why am I noticing the moon? Then I go to my parents' house. And so my mom and dad were at the event. They didn't know I was at the event because I was hidden up in the balcony.
Right.
And so my mom, they got some friends over the house and they're talking about the event and all these people that gave their lives to Christ. And my mom says, Jay, did you go to the event? And I didn't lie, but I didn't tell the truth. I said, Mom, I told you I wasn't going to the event. I told you I wasn't doing that. And she said, I said, why would you even ask me that? I told you I wasn't going. And my mom said, I don't know, there's something different about you tonight. Well, I didn't want to tell my mom because you have to understand, I've been saved less than an hour,
Yeah.
and I don't want to let her down again. And I don't understand at this point that now that I know the Lord, He's going to help me overcome addictions. And I didn't want to tell my mom I got saved if I couldn't break my addictions and then be another failure and letdown to her. So I wasn't going to tell her. Not that I was ashamed of it, but I
Right.
was going to wait until the Lord could help me overcome my problems. And so anyway, I sat around the house for like 2 hours. And when I left, my mom caught me at the door and she said, son, look at, she said, son, look at me. And I said, what's up, mom? I'm trying to hide all this thing. Again,
Yeah.
I'm trying to protect my mother.
Right.
And my mom says, Jay, I don't know what it is, but there's something different about you. I wanted to tell her so bad. I wanted to say, Mom, I gave my life to Christ. I have hope and I have peace. But I didn't want to let
Yeah.
my mom in, so I didn't say anything. I just left. I said, "All right, mom, I got to go." Couldn't get out of there quick enough, and it took about a week. About a week later, I went home and I said, "Mom, uh, yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
I left Christ that night." And actually moved back in with my mom and dad. My mom told me about 2 weeks after that. She said, man, Jay, I've always loved you, but I love the new you. She said, you don't look the same. You don't talk the same. She said, I don't even know who you are anymore. I mean, man, God changed my life so drastically, man. So,
It's so it's so I mean, it's so crazy of how fast the he works immediate. Like I remember I didn't find I mean, I'm grew up somewhat the same, went to church when I was in high school, dated a PK, crazy times. I mean, I was like, these are how pastors' kids act. I mean, it was crazy. And then some things happened to where I was like, I don't need the church. If this is who God's going to put in front of me, I don't need these people. I'm going to build my own relationship, blah blah blah, which of course never happens.
yeah,
And then I found Jesus again when I was 33, and that's when it was like real.
yeah,
All the things, became a worship leader, went and helped plant churches, all of these things. But I distinctly remember that Sunday sitting in church running sound when it happened. I mean, and it was like you said, you walk outside and who cares if it's corny? Everything is a little different. Everything is a little brighter and happier. And I've been an extremely depressed person my whole life. Um, Dealt with abandonment issues and all of those kinds of things. I have a mark on my wrist where I I played around with the idea. I mean, I never really got super serious, but even playing around with the idea is is bad enough,
yeah,
especially like you said earlier. Um, we're too nervous to ask for help, or we're the other type where we're going to do something very extreme so everybody else can be like, "Oh, okay, well, maybe he's serious about whatever it is." And I know since this moment, you have done books and I mean, you had a TV show that kind of highlighted the the bad of the bad, and how they kind of lived their life before they found some sort of meaning in life.
Yeah.
Kind of talk about how people can identify maybe people around them, because I think that's the important thing. Is there's people like us who will never say anything that we're struggling, but I know you spent tons of time and research and all these other things trying to figure out what are those telltale signs, or what are those things that you could see in your family or your friends or whatever, and that maybe they're crying, they're crying out loud without saying anything.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, a lot of people who do struggle with suicidal tendencies, um, not everybody, but there are a lot like me who didn't want anybody to know. And the more I could isolate myself and the more I could withdraw from friends and from family, I withdrew really from everybody except my roommate because I had no choice. But not everybody's that way. And typically, for most people, and again, you can't always say everybody about anything, but there are typically warning signs. Um, some of them I've mentioned today that were evident in my own life. Depression, mental health issues. Now, again, I'm not saying everybody that has mental health issues is suicidal, but somebody who, like me, had all my life been a very outgoing, very involved with other people, and all of a sudden starting to withdraw from other people, isolating themselves. Another form of that for some people is aggression. It's the opposite of depression, it's aggression. Somebody who maybe has typically been very mild, who begins to act out. You see this a lot of times, especially in the younger age groups, teenagers. They're in trouble at school. Their response to their mom and dad or their grandparents is not what it usually would be, or their brother and sister. We're not talking about a one-off. We're talking about signs of behavior that seem to go on. Another one is threats. Things like, I wish I'd never been born. The world would be better off without me. Things like this. And then you'll hear someone say, well, they're just trying to get attention. Hello? Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to do. It may be a subtle way of them, rather than saying, I'm at home on my sofa staring at a gun, thinking about ending my life. It may be their way of saying, don't you see that I'm hurting? Don't you see that I'm struggling? And for some people, I mean, obviously, some people will come out and tell you. I mean, I had a close friend that if anybody ought to recognize the warning signs, that ought to be me. And he met me at Taco Bell and said, Jay, I'm having marital issues. And I knew they were having issues. I never knew he was going to take a rope and hang himself in the shower with his two kids there. But anyway, threats should be taken seriously. It should be a flag that I need to get involved in someone's life. Another one that we see commonly, and I would say, I think this is a little bit more prevalent in the younger community, but not exclusive, is tragedy. I had someone tell me 2 weeks ago, someone I know who found out their husband was having an affair, that they were contemplating ending their life. It could be, you've seen this even on the national news, oftentimes, where there will be a teenager, and it doesn't just happen to teenagers, but a teenager who commits suicide, and then they have 3 or 4 students in the same school that end up following suit. So, that's 4 or 5 that would come to mind right offhand. I'll tell you another one that you'll see is, and again, this would be more so in a younger age group, but again, all these apply to any age group, is people all of a sudden start giving away things. This has been something that's been very common among the teenage culture. Giving away possessions that maybe things that you knew were very important to them. Again, some of the signs are very subtle and sometimes they're very blatant, but all those signs need to be treated with the utmost respect and the utmost alarm.
So if someone sees some of these things that are a continuous thing, it's not like a one-offs, like you said. What do you think? I mean, what should their course of action be? How should they somewhat handle that?
Well, that's a great question. The first thing is don't minimize someone else's pain. I know your intentions are good. Um, but telling somebody everything's going to be all right is really not very soothing. Telling them that things will change tomorrow is really not very soothing. Certainly dismissing their statements that are cry for help about whether I wish I wasn't here, I'm having a hard time finding a reason to live, the world's better off without me, whatever those things are. The best course of action, number one, is accessibility. Number one, if you even think remotely that someone may be in a danger zone, it's confronting the situation. Obviously, I'm not talking about saying, hey, are you thinking about committing suicide? I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about accusing someone. I'm talking about going to someone in confidence and saying, hey, I've noticed some things lately that just worried me. And are you all right? And I want to give you the freedom, if you're not all right, to tell me you're not all right, that it's okay. I want to be a sounding board for you. So the first step is really intervention. It's it's building that bridge, letting someone know that you care. It's not coming to them with all the answers. It's not telling them about how things are going to get better because they don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
It's being accessible. It's intervening. And when I say being accessible, that doesn't just mean, hey, now that you've been a little honest with me or given some credence to my concerns, that I'm praying for you. Well, that's great, but it's got to be deeper than that. It's got to be a thing where, as I told this individual 2 weeks ago, when they reached out to me at 12:30 at night, I said, my phone's on 24 hours a day. And I want you to know, and they already know this, but I said, I am here anytime, day or night, I'm accessible. And that means if I have to come to your house, I'll come to your house. That means if you have to come to my house, that means you come to my house. If that means I need to, whatever I need to do, if I need to help you get into a facility, it means I help you get into a facility. If it means nothing else, that I'm a sounding board where you have someone to vent without giving all the answers, with just listening and letting you know I love you and I care about you. Those are the two most important things. You see, there's been this myth for a long time that talking about suicide leads to suicide. And that's a lie. It's proven that the greatest deterrent to people committing suicide is talking about suicide. And so, again, intervention, accessibility, a sounding board, all those things mean way more than trying to pretend you have all the answers, trying to pretend that you have a solution. You and I know that even in the most mundane of things, sometimes just having someone to talk to that you know cares in a judgment-free zone in and of itself means the world.
100%. Now, if I'm pretty sure you probably have resources and stuff for people that may be either going through this or um, can kind of see it in real time. How one, how can they get a hold of you if they have questions or whatnot? And then two, I'm assuming it's on your website. You have some
Yeah,
resources.
I mean, man, I'm easy to find. I mean, you can Google my name, and there are. I mean, I've talked about this in radio interviews, podcasts. I've been on television. We got resources on my website. My name is Jay Lowder, but it's not Lou. It's Lowder, and you can Google Jay Lowder. I mean, there's a plethora of resources that are available through us and through other even national organizations as well. But yeah, you can Google my name and find plenty of resources that we offer, talks that I've given on, resources that I've given. I mean, it's all very easy to find. But
Fantastic.
jlowder.com. It's just Google my name or type in jlowder.com.
Lowder.
That's
And
right.
he's got books out. I mean, this Navigate devotional you have, kind of like helping people go through the traps and falls of life, kind of helps you navigate some of that stuff. Website I think is Darkest Hour TV, where you got some episodes of some people who have gone through the mess
Right.
and then found a purpose super, super inspiring. And then you also have a podcast called, was it Taboo Talk with Jay?
Taboo talk, right?
Where you talk about
The things that people don't normally talk about.
things that people don't normally talk about. Many avenues to get a hold of him. I suggest you do. Man, thank you for your time. I already have like 3 or 4 different ideas, and I'm gonna reach back out to you of another episode of where we can kind of maybe pin. We'll go through one road instead of the intro and a whole bunch of stuff. But I really, really appreciate your time, and I hope people that see this or are going through this, they reach out to you to get these resources or get kind of information. And of course, man, if you need someone to come talk about all of this stuff, your church, your men's group, your outdoor organization, right? You're available for all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
Man, fantastic. Well, thank you for your time, Jay. I appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Good being with you today, man. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Thank you for joining us on this latest edition to the Storyfield podcast. We hope that you have been challenged, inspired, and ready to take that next step, whatever that is. If you know someone with an amazing story that needs to be heard, send us an email at info@thestoryfield.com. Have a fantastic day, and we can't wait for you to join us on the next episode of The Storyfield.